Hi everybody, it's Christopher and welcome to Life's Not Over, It Just Looks Different on YouTube. Earlier this year, I did a video talking about my hydrocephalus journey and sharing some of the experiences I've had over the 15 shunt revisions I've had to treat my hydrocephalus through my lifetime. That video has had a fair amount of views, thank you very much. It's had some comments and questions, thank you for those as well, I appreciate it. And it's also triggered some emails that I've received and some questions that I've been asked about growing up with hydrocephalus. And one question that I want to respond to today is something I was asked not that long ago actually. Somebody asked me if I was ever excluded from any activities or considered special needs. And there's a bit of a two-part answer to that question, but the main response is no, I wasn't. I was a fairly normal kid. I went to friends' birthday parties. They came to my birthday parties. I didn't have any resource teachers or educational assistants or anything help me through school. I didn't require any of that. In elementary school, the only reason that the kids in my elementary school days knew about my shunt and about my hydrocephalus was mostly because I was missing school to go in for shunt revisions, especially in kindergarten grades 1, 2, and 3. I had to go in for shunt revisions well, pretty much every one of those school years. I never got a perfect attendance record for anything. Because I was always missing school for a shunt revision. And so the kids knew about it, the teachers knew about it, and I don't recall being really treated that differently. Yes, the kids were fascinated by the idea that I had this tube in my body and this button under my skin that they could feel, those who wanted to touch it, but they couldn't see it. And so, yeah, they called me Buttonhead, a few kids did, whatever. It didn't stick, it was dumb nickname. So that was what it was like to grow up in elementary school. And in fact, after the surgery in grade 3, during grade 3, I had to go in because it wasn't one of the times when I was going in because I was growing into the shunt. I had actually had an accident where I was run over on a toboggan hill by some people on a very large inner tube, the kind of inner liner you would find in mining equipment, because I was living in a mining town. And I was apparently run over by an inner tube that had about 9 people on it, which triggered an incident. I was taken to hospital, had to have emergency surgery on the shunt. And in fact, they ended up doing it twice during that hospital stay, because the first one I didn't recover the way I was supposed to and it didn't take. So they ended up doing it twice in the same visit. So I think for that one, I ended up being out of school a little bit longer. It was probably about 2 to 3 weeks. I don't recall exactly. But it was long enough that I guess as a class project, my grade 3 teacher suggested that everybody write a letter to me. So I remember getting this big yellow envelope with letters from and notes from all of my classmates that year. And I don't have those notes anymore. I don't have that envelope anymore. But I do remember some of the things that the kids wrote in it. It brings back really good memories when I think about it. It was a nice thing to receive. But because the surgeon put in some extra length of catheter for me to grow into back in grade 3, through grades 4, 5, and 6, I didn't have to go in for any more shunt revisions. And so then when we moved out of my little hometown of Atikokan, Ontario, and moved to Dryden, Ontario, through those grades, I didn't have to have a shunt revision, so I don't recall the teachers in that school ever knowing about it, or my classmates ever knowing about it. I'm sure a few of them knew, probably my closer friends, but for the most part, I don't think my classmates knew about it back then. Going to and from hospital for those shunt revisions in those early days was not easy for my parents, because in the very early days, before I started school, they had to take me from our little hometown in northwest Ontario called Atikokan. Love that little town. They had to take me from there to Winnipeg, and I don't know the exact route they took, but I think they went across, kind of dipped down into the United States, came back up from North Dakota back into Manitoba. But I think all in all, it was about a 6-hour journey each way. So not exactly something they could do after work to come and visit me or anything like that. So I remember those early days. I don't remember seeing my parents while I was in hospital a whole lot. Later, in about the mid to late 70s, I started going to Thunder Bay, Ontario, because they had a surgeon there that could do shunt revisions. That was still not an easy trip for Mom and Dad, because it was still a 2-hour drive from Atikokan to Thunder Bay. So not exactly something they were doing after work still. But what was different about the stay in Thunder Bay was my grandmother lived in Thunder Bay, my mom's mom. So she used to come in and visit me regularly after work whenever she could. And don't tell anybody this, but she used to sneak in chocolate milkshakes for me. It was awesome. I have a lot of great memories from my time in the Thunder Bay hospitals, not only from Grandma's visits and those chocolate milkshakes, but also it was a time when there was 4 of us kids to a room, 4 patients to a room. So I remember some of the experiences with some of those kids. One in particular, I remember this kid that was in the bed next to me. I think I was about 9 years old at the time, and there was this teenager who I think was about 15 or 16 in the bed next to me. And being an older kid, he had I think a tape player or maybe just a radio, I'm not sure which. And he had music that he was playing. So I got very turned on to some of the music that he was playing back in those days. I've always loved music, always been fascinated by 70s music and that sort of thing. So that was probably part of what triggered it, and my love of music and fascination with the 70s music was some of those experiences. Then there was junior high, and so to the question of was I ever excluded from some things? Yes. During junior high, yes I was. Junior high was a very tough time. It's a hard time for most kids in school anyway. There's changes happening to our bodies. We're adjusting to social elements and all of these kind of things. There's a lot going on in junior high school. And in my early days of grade 7, our family had just moved to Winnipeg. I was new to the school. I was a small kid. I was a nerdy kid, a geek, whatever label you want to put on it. I did not fit in. I remember leaving the school one day. As I was leaving the school, I was walking away, and these 2 kids came up behind me and they knocked me down, and thought it was funny. I picked myself up, kept walking. They came up and knocked me down again, and I picked myself up and kept walking. Got home that day and had my uncle was teasing me. My uncle was staying with us at the time, and he was kind of teasing me a little bit. And I told him I had a headache. I didn't want to play, and so he asked me what was wrong. I told him what had happened at school. I didn't intend for him to tell my mom about it. But he did. And my mom, back in those days especially, oh man, she was the embodiment of Mama Bear. Holy smoke. She went nuts on the school, ranting and raving and yelling at people. And, well, that led to some more things to make me stand out in school in junior high that did not help me be any less of a nerd or a geek. First, I had to go into the school office. They put a Rolodex in front of me with the student ID cards of every kid in the school and I try to identify the kids who had knocked me down. I was able to pick out one but not the other, but it didn't matter. By association, they knew who the other kid was. The other thing that came out of that was they decided that it would be a good idea for me to tell all the kids in school about my shunt and my hydrocephalus and how I couldn't be physically contacted, you know, in the head or anywhere in the path of travel of the shunt. So the original plan, as I understood it, was that I was going to talk to the classes just on my floor of the school. But it grew, and I ended up going into, I think, pretty much every class in the school, talking about my hydrocephalus, my shunt, how I was basically delicate. Yeah, so if I wasn't enough of a nerd or a geek already, holy smokes, that did not help. And then on the subject of being excluded from certain activities, the gym teachers, the phys ed teachers, in order to keep me safe, they did a couple of things. For many activities, even things like playing badminton or basketball, they had me wear a hockey helmet. I had a little blue Jofa hockey helmet that I wore because I didn't stand out enough already. I needed to stand out just a little bit more by having to wear a hockey helmet to play basketball. Some of the time, they, rather than have me participate in the activities, they had me sit on the sidelines, or I remember this happening in grade 7, or was it 8? I think it was grade 7. They put me in a room adjacent to the gymnasium during my phys ed classes. They put me in a room adjacent to the gymnasium with another one of my classmates who had cerebral palsy and had a problem with one of her legs and one of her arms. And they had us watch Jane Fonda fitness videos and work out to those. Oh, those videos. So that was how I was excluded from some of the activities of junior high phys ed classes. And the only other thing, I suppose, and I think I touched on this in the other video, but the only other thing that was really different about growing up as a kid with hydrocephalus, I was not allowed to play contact sports. So I wasn't allowed to play hockey, organized hockey, wasn't allowed to play contact football. I did play flag football or touch football. I played hockey with friends, just, you know, in a pickup game on the ice, or I played street hockey, I played floor hockey. So I got to do those things. I just didn't get to play organized sports where there was going to be physical contact involved. I wasn't allowed to do those things for fear of damage to the shunt. The extra length of catheter that they put in back in when I was in grade 3 in 1980 did so well that when I got to high school, I don't recall anybody knowing about my hydrocephalus unless I told them. I'm not sure if my phys ed teachers knew. I know the school nurse knew, because I remember she and I had a conversation about my shunt. She asked if it was a VA shunt, and I said, no, it's a VP shunt because it goes into my abdomen. So that was the one conversation I remember having with the school nurse. When it came to phys ed classes, I don't think I had to tell the phys ed teachers about it because they would give us a choice of activities to do. About every 6 or 8 weeks, they would change up the activity that we did. So having that choice of activities to do, I just chose the one that worked for me and that I didn't figure I'd get hurt. So I didn't really have to tell anybody about the hydrocephalus, and the shunt was working really well. It was functioning well, so I didn't have to do any of that. So that was how I got through school years and growing up with hydrocephalus. That was, you know, except for those junior high years, that was probably the toughest part. But other than that, growing up with hydrocephalus, I was a fairly normal kid and did things that my friends did, laughed with them, joked with them, kept reasonably good grades. That's everything I wanted to share in today's video about what it was like to grow up with hydrocephalus. I want to thank everybody who's watched the videos, who has made comments. Click like down below, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for doing all of those things. I really do appreciate it. And if you have questions for me about hydrocephalus or my life with cortical visual impairment or anything like that, I'm not a medical expert. I can't speak to the medical aspects of some of these things, but I can definitely share what it was like to grow up with them or what I've experienced. You can drop me a comment down below, or send me an email at christopher@lifesnotover.ca, and I'll be more than happy to take your email, respond as best I can, share any insight that I can on what it was like to, or what it is like to be a person with hydrocephalus and a person with cortical visual impairment. To the best of my ability, I'll share my experience. I want to thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate each and every one of you who watches these videos. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.